Long before the origin of our species, humans had been thriving for well over 1 million years. Various species of human around the world descended from one adventurous hominin, Homo erectus. This species was able to leave its ancestral home and thrive in many diverse environments full of animals that almost appear as fiction to us. Despite living amongst deadly carnivores and often aggressive herbivores, Homo erectus was able to thrive around much of Eurasia and Africa. Today we will be talking about all of the strange and wonderful extinct animals that Homo erectus shared their world with. We have a lot to cover, but this journey will leave you with a fascinating appreciation for how diverse and weird the world's fauna was before we wiped most of it out. This is the second episode in a series where I will document all of the creatures humanity has had the pleasure to witness. Make sure to check out the previous episode about the Neanderthals. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Appearing over 2 million years ago, Homo erectus is often considered to be the first human species. This is largely due to their anatomy. Their skulls are fairly similar to ours, but are more heavily built. They had relatively large brains at between 600 to 800 cubic centimeters, with some later individuals attaining a brain size of over 1100 cubic centimeters. In comparison, modern humans have a brain size of around 1300 cubic centimeters. Their limb proportions were roughly around the same as modern humans, featuring long legs. Their hands and feet show us that they were not adapted for life in the trees and spent their lives walking and running on the ground. Males were between 5'6" to 6 feet tall, or 167 centimeters to 183 centimeters tall. They were relatively light at between 123 to 150 pounds, or 56 to 68 kilograms. Females were smaller at between 5 foot to 5'3", or 152 to 163 centimeters. They were also quite light at between 100 and 120 pounds, or 45 to 54 kilograms. They made complex tools such as Acheulean hand axes. Cores of stone were worked on both sides to create a sharp object. They used them to butcher animals, process food, and probably as weapons from time to time. We don't have direct evidence that they used spears, though due to the nature of wood, they may have not been preserved. Considering Homo erectus appears to have hunted various animals, and even chimpanzees used spears in the modern day, it is highly likely that Homo erectus made at least crude spears. They also may have simply used rocks as projectile weapons. Some evidence suggests that Homo erectus used fire from time to time, though they do not seem to have been able to create it. Though their technology may seem primitive to us, they were able to spread all over Africa, Europe, and Asia. Expanding into new ecosystems is no easy task, especially considering the dozens of fearsome and intimidating animals that already fought for survival in these lands. We start our archaic safari in the African homeland. Most evidence suggests that Homo erectus first evolved in East Africa, though this is debated. Africa contains some of the most terrifying and wondrous animals alive in the modern day. But 2 million years ago, the fauna of Africa was on a whole nother level. All of the modern African predators such as hyenas, cheetahs, wild dogs, leopards, and lions had ancestors living in Africa during this time. These ancestors were often larger than their modern varieties and must have been just as menacing. An animal which undoubtedly snacked on erectus was deinotheres. Deinotheres was a species of large saber-toothed cat. They weighed between 260 to 400 pounds, or between 120 to 180 kilograms. They were powerfully built with short but strong limbs. Their teeth were longer than any modern big cat, though small compared to other species in the Monkerodontinae subfamily. Their build appears to have been adapted to ambushing larger prey animals in forested environments. They ranged all over Africa, Europe, and Asia, making it certain that Homo erectus often had run-ins with these beasts. In South Africa, Paranthropus skulls with holes in their crania suggest that deinotheres took down these hominins. Some have speculated that these animals specifically targeted hominins, but by studying the carbon isotope ratios from deinotheres teeth from South Africa, it was found that they were likely to hunt grazing animals rather than hominids. But the study also looked at another saber-toothed cat from the same environment, Meganterion. It was found that this animal was much more likely to have regularly preyed on hominids. Furthermore, Meganterion often left half-eaten carcasses to be eaten by scavengers, including hominins like Homo erectus. It is theorized that this behavior may have led to the expansion and success of early hominins. Though considering the isotopic evidence, Megantereon also ate its fair share of hominins. The animals, depending on the species, were truly saber-toothed cats. They were around the size of a jaguar, though larger individuals could weigh between 330 to 550 pounds, or 150 to 250 kilograms. They lived all throughout Africa and Eurasia, and we even have some more intriguing evidence to mention when we move to Europe. Though we must mention the third saber-toothed cat of Africa and Eurasia, Homo therium. Homo therium was widespread all the way until the end of the last glacial period. Known as the scimitar cat, its long curved canines could be up to 6 inches or 15 centimeters in length. These highly specialized weapons may have been used for slicing the arteries of large prey animals. They were around the same size as African lions, between 330 to 550 pounds or 150 to 250 kilograms. They were undoubtedly fierce competition with Erectus, but also may have preyed on them from time to time. Other felids lived in the range of African Homo erectus, such as the ancestors of Panthera. The genus, which includes many modern big cats, has its origins alongside Erectus in East Africa. Evolving alongside these dangerous animals may have indirectly helped our lineage by having to survive through adversity. Another prominent African predator which we cannot forget is the hyena. Hyenas are brutal animals that hunt in large packs and are still known to occasionally target people to this day. Some 1.7 million year old evidence from Kubifora in Kenya suggests that Erectus may have preyed on or at least been scavenged by these animals. Further evidence from much earlier, around 500,000 years ago, consists of a hominin femur with evidence a hyena preyed on it. This evidence may more correctly belong to Homo heidelbergensis, but it is in the range to be relevant for the discussion. Another animal that is not often discussed is Xenocyon, the ancestors of African wild dogs. They were larger and appear to have been hypercarnivore pack hunters. They weighed between 80 to 200 pounds or 40 to 90 kilograms. They had a strong and robust build, making them formidable hunters. Like their wild dog descendants, they likely hunted in large packs using teamwork to wear down prey over long distances. Up to 15 dogs hunt at a time, and if Xenocyon hunted in a similar way, we can imagine some truly vicious clashes with Homo erectus. Though felids, canids, and hyenas were all terrifying creatures, crocodilians may have been the deadliest animals throughout human history. Africa was especially home to these cold-blooded beasts. In East Africa, where our lineage originated, a variety of terrifying species lived 2 million years ago. The ancestors of modern Nile crocodiles lived alongside large species. Crocodilus anthropophagus was a massive crocodile reaching up to 25 feet or 7.5 meters in length. It is estimated that it would have weighed up to 3,300 pounds or 1,500 kilograms. Another closely related species that lived nearby was Crocodilus thorbjornarsoni. This species was around the same size and lived in the Turkana Basin. The Turkana Basin is home to a very famous fossil of African Homo erectus, known as Turkana boy. This boy lived alongside these massive crocodilians, and some of his friends may have lost their lives to them. We know from other hominids such as Homo habilis and Paranthropus that hominins were on the menu for crocodiles, and Homo erectus was no exception. A variety of other crocodiles existed throughout Africa, such as fish-eating varieties, though Homo erectus wouldn't have encountered them as much. Animals that Homo erectus would have seen on a daily basis were other primates. And 2 million years ago, Africa was full of strange and diverse apes, monkeys, and baboons. In the modern day, humans are so distinct from any other animal. Even our closest living relatives don't look all that similar to us. 2 million years ago, this was an entirely different story. Homo habilis was another species in our genus quite closely related to Erectus. So much so that it is thought that Erectus actually descended from habilis, though even if true, habilis would still survive as a distinct species for hundreds of thousands of years. Other early hominids such as Homo rudolfensis and possibly others were distinct populations at this time. Species of Australopithecines were still widespread and diverse 2 million years ago. If you were unaware, our genus is thought to have descended from Australopithecines around 3 million years ago. Australopithecines were relatively small, fully bipedal apes with brains around the same size as chimpanzees. Our lineage diverged, grew physically larger, and our brains would gradually grow. Though other lineages of Australopithecine kept on doing their thing, and Homo erectus would encounter a few of them. Australopithecus sediba was around 4 to 5 feet or 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall. They were also slender at between 65 to 110 pounds or 30 to 50 kilograms. They mainly consumed fruits, leaves, and bark from the forest, whereas Homo erectus and other early hominins mainly ate plants from the savanna, displaying that sediba and early Homo exploited different environments. Another genus of Australopithecine were the robust Australopiths, known as Paranthropus. These hominids were similar to Australopithecus sediba in that they had relatively small bodies and were bipedal, but this genus had much larger and more robust skulls. They had large jaws and a sagittal crest like a gorilla. This was to support strong chewing muscles used for processing tubers, leaves, and seeds. They also appear to have used primitive bone tools for digging as well as some stone tools. They had quite a strange appearance, and considering their diet was pretty similar to early Homo, they may have frequently come into contact with Erectus. Some of our fossils of Paranthropus display evidence of predation from hyenas and crocodiles, indicating that they lived hard and often short lives. The last apes to mention alive during this time were the ancestors of chimpanzees and gorillas. We have very limited fossil evidence of these creatures, though we know that they were around and we know that they would have looked different. Our fossils suggest that these apes have not simply stayed the same over hundreds of thousands of years. Though without more physical evidence, we don't know how exactly they differed during the time of Homo erectus. Homo erectus lived alongside many species of early Homo, Australopithecus, Paranthropus, and the ancestors of modern apes. It is fascinating to think about how Erectus would have perceived these similar yet distinct apes. Some of them ate the same food, had the same tools, and looked almost identical, though there may have been behavioral and social differences that caused them to stay away, or even to enter into conflict. It must have truly been fascinating to see the real Planet of the Apes take place. Though the Planet of the Apes might not be accurate considering that baboons larger than Erectus prowled the savanna. One of these baboon-like primates was Deinotheres. This animal was absolutely terrifying. Our evidence indicates that males averaged around 100 pounds or 46 kilograms, though some mature males exceeded 170 pounds or 77 kilograms. When standing on their hind legs, some individuals may have been nearly 6 feet or 1.8 meters tall. To add to this, their canines were up to 5 inches or 12 centimeters long. Such a large and dangerous animal would have been able to defend itself from the largest carnivores and would have been able to bully any hominid. They lived in South and West Africa between 3 to 1 million years ago, making it certain Homo erectus would have come across them. They seem to have inhabited savanna environments where they would have foraged for plants and scavenged the occasional carcass. Considering they lived throughout the range of Homo erectus for over 1 million years, there is no doubt that these species interacted with each other. Unfortunately, we don't have any evidence, though my imagination is running wild. Deinotheres is one of those animals that is truly stranger than fiction. How cool would a movie be about a group of Homo erectus surviving in Africa amongst these animals? You could write such a terrifying thriller, and seriously, if anyone has connections in the film industry, I have some ideas. Contact me. Besides Deinotheres, there were a variety of other very large baboon-like primates that lived in Africa. Therapithecus oswaldi could weigh up to 159 pounds or 72 kilograms, and Therapithecus brumpti and Gorgopithecus were also quite large. Besides carnivores and primates, there were many fascinating herbivores present in Africa during the reign of Erectus. Cephalotherium was a giant giraffid with a stocky build and interesting antler-like ossicones. It could weigh up to 3,000 pounds or 1,360 kilograms, making it one of the largest known ruminants. Syncerus antiquus, or the giant African buffalo, had massive horns being as much as 9.8 feet or 3 meters from tip to tip. These animals were also massive at up to 4,400 pounds or 2,000 kilograms. Hippopotamus are one of the deadliest animals in Africa in the modern day, and this could have been true when Homo erectus was around. 2 million years ago, a larger species, Hippopotamus gorgops, were present all over Africa. These animals were as large as 8,800 pounds or 4,000 kilograms. That is as large as an Asian elephant. Hippopotamus are very territorial and aggressive animals that will attack on sight. Considering they live in bodies of water that Erectus had to drink from, we can imagine that there were clashes. We actually do have evidence that Erectus interacted with these animals. Butchered remains of Gorgops have been found in Algeria dating to 1.8 million years ago, in Kenya dating to 1.76 million years ago, and finally in Eritrea dating to 1 million years ago. These remains are found with many cut marks as well as stone tools nearby, making it certain that hominins were involved. It is possible that these animals were hunted, though due to their size and ferocity, it is far more likely that they were scavenged. Though if you recall from the last episode, Neanderthals were able to take down massive straight-tusked elephants with simple spears, and it is possible Erectus killed these beasts. It is unlikely, though I will never underestimate the capability of our ancestors. Homo erectus would have also been familiar with rhinoceros. By this time, the white and black rhinoceros were already genetically isolated. Both of these species would have run into Homo erectus, and we do have evidence of cut marks on rhinoceros bones from Kenya. The largest animals Homo erectus would have seen were proboscideans. This includes the ancestors of African and forest elephants, which of course were larger than modern elephants. Another proboscidean related to modern Asian elephants was particularly large. Named Paleoloxodon or Elephas reki, this animal could be up to 14 feet or 4.3 meters at the shoulder. Smaller specimens were around 10,000 pounds or 4,500 kilograms, while the biggest were up to 33,000 pounds or 15,000 kilograms. That is 10,000 pounds heavier than the largest T-Rex and a few thousand pounds heavier than the largest Triceratops. This elephant was literally bigger than most dinosaurs. Such massive animals would have been nearly invincible. Though we have found many other remains with butchery marks from stone tools. Remains dating to over 1 million years ago show us that Homo erectus was taking advantage of the carcass of reki. It is very unlikely that these animals were directly hunted, though it is still interesting that hominins were scavenging their carcasses. One site shows that hominins brought stone to the site and then were worked into tools, while another shows evidence that elephant skulls were fractured. Anincus was another large proboscidean related to elephants. It was around the same size as African bush elephants, but some individuals were larger. The strangest proboscidean Erectus may have run into was Deinotherium. Deinotherium was a large elephant-like proboscidean that thrived in Africa for millions of years. They were unique for having longer and more flexible necks and downward-facing lower tusks. The species that lived alongside Erectus was around 12 feet or 3.6 meters at the shoulder and weighed 20,000 pounds or 9,000 kilograms. They were massive, but their most notable feature were their strange tusks. Wear analysis suggests that they were used for removing branches so they could get access to better leaves, though they could have also been used for defense against rivals or predators. Erectus may have scavenged these beasts from time to time, though we don't have any evidence. You have to imagine how Homo erectus would have communicated with each other about their world. It is thought that they had language or proto-language, but they undoubtedly faced many challenges. Just like Africa over 1 million years ago, today's media landscape faces unique challenges. Echo chambers and filter bubbles obscure the line between fact and fiction. Just from my little corner of the internet, it's concerning to see how misinformation is sensationalized and spread so quickly. So let's talk about the solution, today's sponsor, Ground News. They're an app and website that gather the world's news in one place, sort them by story, then pull data on each source's political lean, credibility, and ownership. With this information, you can think critically about the news you consume, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. They are nonpartisan, independently owned, and subscriber-funded to stay as objective as possible. This way readers can compare coverage and critically think about the world. And they're not just for political news junkies. Ground News is for anyone who just wants to know the facts like me. One of their stories that caught my attention was about how the human genome has been stored inside a nearly indestructible crystal. It can endure extreme temperatures and cosmic radiation for a smooth journey through space. My Vantage plan gets me access to every source covering this, including original research and visual breakdowns of data that can influence how a story is framed or whether it is reported on at all. I really think Ground News is fixing long-standing issues in the news landscape, like helping you form your own opinions and regaining control over your news experience. So if you're looking to stay informed without losing your mind, go to ground.news/north02 or scan my QR code to find truth amid sensationalism. My viewers save 50% on the same Vantage plan I use for unlimited access to all their features. Subscribing not only supports an independent, nonpartisan platform working to make the media landscape more transparent, but also to help support my channel. Alright, now let's get back to the video. Finally, moving out of the continent of Africa and into Europe, we find many unique animals. Homo erectus first made it to Europe around 1.8 million years ago. This is known from the remains of the Manisi hominins from Georgia. The Manisi hominins may have represented an early migration because other hominins wouldn't spread into the rest of Europe until around 500,000 years later. Perhaps it was because this environment was challenging to these hominins, likely because of the cold and the unique fauna from the region. Felids were certainly a problem for these early adventurers. Of the 5 skulls recovered at Manisi, one of the skulls had wounds that may have been caused by Meganterion. We have already covered this beast, though it goes to show how dangerous the lives of these hominins were on the frontier of their range. When Homo erectus first arrived, cave lions or their ancestors had not made it to the region yet, but a variety of other cats had. Panthera gombazogensis, or the European jaguar, was present in Europe during this time. It was larger than modern jaguars, with the largest individuals weighing around 460 pounds or 210 kilograms. The ancestors of modern pumas or mountain lions, known as Puma pardoides, were also found in Europe during this time. Another strange felid that Erectus may have ran into was the giant cheetah. Found all the way in Western Europe, these animals were twice the size of modern cheetahs, with the largest reaching 265 pounds or 120 kilograms. They appear to have been adapted to sprinting like modern cheetahs, but their size would have limited their speed, though the extra body mass may have allowed them to take down larger prey. Hominins are already slow, but there was certainly no outrunning the giant cheetah. The largest felid in Europe during this time was Homo therium, which of course we have already discussed. Since Homo erectus lived in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years until gradually evolving into later species, Panthera fossilis, the ancestor of cave lions, could be counted. These cats were some of the largest of all time, weighing up to 1,100 pounds or 500 kilograms. The largest ligers are about this size, which can give us some idea of how large Panthera fossilis were. Felids still prey on hominins in the modern day, and the half a dozen that lived alongside Erectus may have caused a significant amount of casualties, though a handful of other carnivores were just as vicious.
And one such example was the Pachycrocuta, a thankfully now extinct genus of hyena that lived across large swathes of northern Eurasia. As you know, hyenas in general are quite scary, but Pachycrocuta was on a whole other level, as it was one of the largest hyenas to have ever lived, with individuals weighing on average around 100 kilograms or 220 pounds. And some may have gotten even bigger, potentially reaching up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds. Such size was terrible news for our ancestors, and made only worse when you consider that contrary to popular belief, hyenas actually hunt down most of their food, but will still happily scavenge if given the chance, with a significant portion of their calories coming from carrion in certain hyena species. So it's fair to assume that Pachycrocuta may have both hunted a wide variety of prey and taken advantage of carcasses, which could have been abundant as other predators like the giant cheetah and other felids cannot break bones, often leaving much of their kills for other carnivores. And because Homo erectus also scavenged frequently, they likely would have come into contact often with the Pachycrocuta, and thus possibly leading to violent confrontations, an issue further intensified by Pachycrocuta's tendency to live in caves. However, while all signs do point to likely interactions, so far no conclusive fossil evidence of them meeting in Europe has been discovered, although there is some pretty interesting information on that matter. Yet, we'll get to that when we talk about Europe. And by the way, if you couldn't tell by the voice, this is not North, but instead ExtinctZoo. I make videos about extinct animals, and I actually just made a whole video about the bigger cousin of the Pachycrocuta. In other words, the largest hyena to ever exist, the Deinotheres. So if that sounds interesting, feel free to check that out. And stay tuned for a video on my channel that'll feature North.
Bears are another fascinating animal that would have fought over carcasses and taken up cave space. When Homo erectus was around in Europe, 2 species of bear were present: cave bears and Ursus etruscus. The cave bear was a massive species of bear that survived alongside the Neanderthals all the way up until the arrival of our species. By studying the teeth of cave bears, we know that they mostly ate a plant-based diet, but despite this, they were not to be messed with. They were larger than most modern bears, with males weighing between 770 to 1,320 pounds or 350 to 600 kilograms. Such a large and likely aggressive animal would have been best to be avoided by Homo erectus with only wooden spears. The other bear they would have come across often was Ursus etruscus. These animals are thought to be the direct ancestors of modern brown bears. They were much smaller at around 220 pounds or 100 kilograms, though this is nothing to scoff at. A bear of that size can still be quite dangerous, especially for the relatively light Homo erectus with relatively primitive tools. The last predator to mention is Canis mosbackensis, which were the ancestors of modern wolves. They appeared around the same time Erectus spread into Europe and certainly encountered them. They were a little smaller than modern Eurasian wolves with a maximum weight of 110 pounds or 50 kilograms. We don't have evidence of interactions between Erectus and mosbackensis, though it is interesting to think that some of their descendants would eventually become best friends. Besides predators, primates were present in Europe over 1 million years ago. The largest and most fascinating species was Pareidolicopithecus. These terrestrial monkeys were similar to macaques and were adapted to life on the ground. Perhaps most interestingly, their ankle joints were remarkably similar to Australopithecus, which was fully bipedal. Pareidolicopithecus spent its life on the ground, and much of it may have been spent walking on 2 legs. What makes it even more bizarre is that it was quite large, weighing between 60 to 100 pounds or 27 to 45 kilograms. When standing on their hind legs, they could reach 5 feet or 1.5 meters tall. This makes Pareidolicopithecus one of the largest species of monkey ever discovered. Their diet appears to have been omnivorous, including fruits, leaves, and small animals. Like baboons and other monkeys, they also had large canines reaching up to 1.6 inches or 4 centimeters in length. Their biceps were similar to that of baboons and had increased flexibility and strength, which suggests that they may have been able to use their arms to carry things and possibly use tools. We haven't found any indication that they used stone tools, though sticks, rocks, and bones may have been wielded. This is extremely interesting, as one of the main things that set us hominids apart from other animals was our ability to walk bipedally, carry things, and use tools. Pareidolicopithecus may have been on a similar evolutionary path as we were. If left alone, perhaps we would be living in a very different world where Europe was inhabited by sophisticated bipedal monkeys. Once again, this is an example of how the past can be stranger than fiction. Europe was also home to an array of unique herbivores which Homo erectus may have hunted. Aurochs were the undomesticated ancestors of modern cattle, so in a way they are not extinct. They were very large, weighing up to 2,200 pounds or 1,000 kilograms. They had large deadly horns that Erectus and predators alike had to stay away from. The aurochs actually survived in Europe well into medieval times, with the last one dying out in Poland in 1627. The next large herbivores that were present in Europe were Megaloceros or the Irish elk. These massive deer lived all over Eurasia. They were on average a little larger than a modern moose or European elk, but the main difference was their absolutely giant antlers. Their antlers reached up to 12 feet or 3.7 meters from tip to tip. That is twice the width of the largest moose antlers ever measured. They had the largest antlers ever discovered and were undoubtedly intimidating animals. The broad-fronted moose was another giant deer species found in Europe during this time. It was one of the largest deer that ever lived at up to 2,600 pounds or 1,200 kilograms. A more aggressive and much larger herbivore in Europe during this time was Hippopotamus antiquus. Unlike modern hippopotamus, these animals could survive in a broader range of environments not limited only to bodies of water. Antiquus weighed as much as 9,300 pounds or 4,200 kilograms. The largest Antiquus would have rivaled the weight of adult mammoths and elephants. They had massive tusks and were likely aggressive and territorial. It would have been best for Erectus to stay away from these animals. Various species of rhinoceros lived throughout Europe. This included the ancestors of woolly rhinoceros and the ancestors of lesser-known species such as Merck's rhinoceros and the narrow-nosed rhinoceros. One very unique species was Elasmotherium. Elasmotherium was a massive species of rhinoceros that at 10,000 pounds or 4,500 kilograms weighed as much as many mammoths. Elasmotherium may have had a massive horn that could be as much as 5 feet or 1.5 meters in length. The recent analysis suggests that it may have had a large dome instead of a horn. Regardless, this must have been a fascinating animal to see in life. One of the largest animals of Europe during this time was Mammuthus meridionalis, or the southern mammoth. This species of mammoth is the ancestor of the much later woolly mammoth, which evolved only around 400,000 years ago. Mammuthus meridionalis was very large at 13 feet or 4 meters tall at the shoulder. They were also quite heavy at up to 25,000 pounds or 11,400 kilograms. Interestingly, we've even found evidence that the earliest Erectus in Europe, the Manisi hominins, consumed these beasts. Remains dating to 1.8 million years ago found at Manisi display cut marks, suggesting Erectus was scavenging their remains. At a site all the way in Spain dating to 1.3 million years ago, remains of the southern mammoth have also been found butchered. These remains were almost certainly scavenged, but it is fun to think about the lives these people lived. Wandering around impressive landscapes, gathering plants, and occasionally finding a massive carcass. I can't stop thinking about a Homo erectus Quest for Fire-esque movie. If anyone knows someone in Hollywood, please contact me. Another proboscidean which appeared in Europe a little later was Paleoloxodon antiquus. This animal descended from the massive Paleoloxodon reki in Africa. It was also massive, with males being 13 feet or 4 meters tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 33,000 pounds or 15,000 kilograms. The largest remains of Antiquus found in Spain may have been up to 15 feet or 4.6 meters tall at the shoulder, and as much as 42,000 pounds or 19,000 kilograms. Their tusks were also massive at 4 meters or 13 feet in length. How fascinating would it have been to see one of these giants? Now it is time to move to Asia, the last domain of Erectus. It is important to note that Homo erectus survived in Asia, especially East and Southeast Asia, longer than anywhere else. Our youngest remains of Erectus are between 117 to 108,000 years old from Java. Since they lived in Asia for over 2 million years, they had the chance to see some of the most fascinating animals that hominins ever encountered. Many of the same predators found in Europe and Africa also ranged into Asia. The giant cheetah, Homotherium, and Meganterion would have been significant threats, though Asia was home to a variety of unique felids. Meganterion nihoanensis was a subspecies of Meganterion that lived in northern China. It was similar in size to other Meganterion subspecies, but it had longer canines, reaching up to 4 inches or 10 centimeters in length. This animal is closely related to Smilodon, the animal we typically think about in regard to saber-toothed cats. Hemimycaridus was another saber-toothed cat that lived in Java. It was smaller than other felids at 290 pounds or 130 kilograms. Perhaps the most intimidating felid of Asia was Macaridus. This genus actually lived all over Europe and Africa, though the largest species, M. horribilis, lived in China. It weighed as much as 900 pounds or over 400 kilograms. This felid rivaled Smilodon populator, which is one of the largest known big cats. Such a massive predator armed with such devastating canines could have taken down most animals in its environment. Other more familiar felids were abundant throughout the Pleistocene. This included leopards, snow leopards, lions, cave lions, and tigers. Extinct subspecies of these animals lived alongside Erectus, but due to the length of this video, we will move on. Hyenas were another animal that lived in Asia during the Pleistocene. At the Zuccotian site, we even have evidence that Homo erectus was preyed upon by these animals. Homo erectus populations occupied this cave from 670 to 470,000 years ago. At least 45 different individuals are known from the site, of which 67% showed bite marks ascribed to large mammalian carnivores, particularly the giant short-faced hyena, Pachycrocuta. A 3D map of the remains at the site suggests that many of the hominids were brought into the cave in different pieces by the hyenas. Many of the bones were extensively gnawed and some pulverized by the powerful jaws of these beasts. Interestingly, the site also contains many stone tools as well as evidence of the use of fire. The site was used by both hyenas and hominids, presumably at different times. Hyenas and Erectus were certainly both competing at the very least in cave space, and likely for similar prey. Their lifestyle would have led to many encounters with these horrid animals. As we can see from the evidence, many did fall prey to hyenas. Crocodiles were another animal that would have been a significant threat to Erectus. Much of Asia is densely vegetated. making it easy for crocodiles to hide in ambush. During the Pleistocene, crocodiles were relatively similar to living individuals, though this is still terrifying considering that adult saltwater crocodiles average 17 feet or 5 meters in length and 1,000 pounds or 450 kilograms. These animals would have been a significant threat to Erectus looking for a drink of water or traveling around aquatic environments. Large monitor lizards the size of Komodo dragons were widespread across Asia during the Pleistocene. These animals were up to 10 feet or 3 meters in length and could weigh up to 220 pounds or 100 kilograms. Such large lizards with a deadly venomous bite would have been a threat to Erectus of any age. Shifting our focus from predators to primates, we encounter some of the most intriguing species to ever exist. Though our lineage of great apes originated in Africa, other lineages can trace their old roots in Asia. The most well-known is Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus was a massive species of ape, likely the largest of all time. But before we talk about its size, we must talk about its discovery. In 1935, an anthropologist named Ralph von Koenigswald was traveling in China. He was on a geological survey across East Asia looking for so-called dragon bones. At this time, apothecary shops in China often sold fossilized bones labeled as dragon bones to be used in traditional medicine. In an apothecary shop in Hong Kong, Koenigswald found massive molars that he quickly realized must have belonged to a giant hominoid. Funny enough, he and many others originally hypothesized that this hominoid may have been a hominin, meaning it belonged to our direct line. This was later proven untrue. Koenigswald would find many more fossils, and over the years, thousands of teeth and 4 mandibles have been found. With these remains, it was found that it was closely related to orangutans. But due to the incompleteness of the remains, we are left with a lot of speculation regarding its size. It has typically been depicted as a giant gorilla-like ape, though we now know it was more closely related to orangutans and may have even looked like them. It is estimated that males may have weighed anywhere between 440 to 1,100 pounds or 200 to 500 kilograms. When standing on their hind legs, they may have been 6.5 to 12 feet or 2 to 3.7 meters tall. This is of course very speculative, and in all likelihood they were not on the upper end of these ranges. Regardless, they appear to have been the largest apes of all time. Considering that they lived in East Asia from 2 million to 300,000 years ago, Homo erectus was undoubtedly familiar with these animals. We can only imagine what encounters between these two species may have looked like. Was Homo erectus friendly with these beasts? Did territorial Gigantopithecus lash out and pummel young erectus who got too close? Did Homo erectus hide amongst Gigantopithecus when lions came about? There are so many fascinating possibilities to consider. Besides Gigantopithecus, giant species of orangutans also existed in Asia during this time. And I don't think people realize how big living orangutans can be in the modern day. The largest are 5 feet or 1.5 meters tall when standing upright and can weigh up to 330 pounds or 150 kilograms. Pleistocene subspecies were estimated to be 20% larger, so 6 feet tall and 400 pounds perhaps. Of course, this is a bad estimation, but still. There's even interesting videos of people coming across orangutans in the woods, and it literally looks like Bigfoot. But Bigfoot's not actually real, sorry guys. Gibbons are another species of ape that Homo erectus would have seen. They are still extant today, but they would have seen unique species such as Bunopithecus. Many unique herbivores lived throughout Asia during this time, though I will keep it kinda short due to the length of the video already. Bubalus paleocarabao had horns 8.2 feet or 2 meters from tip to tip. Celebacaris was a giant suid artiodactyl, aka a pig with massive tusks, undoubtedly a dangerous animal to encounter. Asia was also home to a species of giraffe during this time that was around the same size of our surviving varieties. A few species of Chalicotheres were present in Asia during the Pleistocene. These animals are loosely related to odd-toed ungulates such as rhinos, tapirs, and horses, but they took a much different evolutionary path. The Chalicotheres present in Asia during this time walked on their knuckles with elongated gorilla-like forelimbs. This gave them a strange, hunched-over posture. They could be quite large at 6.5 feet or 2 meters tall and nearly 2,000 pounds or 900 kilograms. Another large animal that we have already discussed in length were hippopotamus that lived all the way from the Levant to East Asia. Hexaprotodon was the size of modern hippos, but it had 6 massive incisors in its jaws rather than the normal 4. This gave this beast a terrifying appearance. Hippopotamus behemoth was another massive hippo from Asia, weighing as much as 9,300 pounds or 4,200 kilograms. Rhinoceros were also present in Asia, though we have already mentioned the species. Proboscideans especially thrived in Asia during the Pleistocene. The southern mammoth, Deinotherium, Anancus, and Stegodon were present. But the largest land animal of the Pleistocene was also found in Asia during this time, Paleoloxodon pneumaticus. It may have been the largest land animal since the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. I say maybe because Paraceratherium was right up there in size. Due to incomplete remains, its true size is unknown. One partial skeleton suggests a shoulder height of 4.5 meters or 14.8 feet. 2 partial thigh bones suggest that some individuals reached a height of 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet at the shoulder. The upper estimates for weight put it at 22 tons. That is nearly 50,000 pounds or 23,000 kilograms. If this weight were true, then it would undoubtedly be the largest land mammal of all time, but also exceeding that of many sauropod dinosaurs. Paleoloxodon pneumaticus must have been fascinating to see in life. An animal so large that it is hard to even put it into perspective. Erectus would have certainly been familiar with these animals and may have had deadly encounters with them now and then. Elephants are not always nice animals and are known to commit unprovoked violence. With an animal as large as Pneumaticus, nothing was safe in Pleistocene Asia. A few other species of Paleoloxodon also lived in Asia, but they were smaller and generally not as cool. Well, there it is, all of the unique and interesting animals that Homo erectus would have encountered. Of course, there are a lot of less interesting animals that I didn't cover, but if there's an animal that you wish would have been in this video, comment down below. The world of Homo erectus was full of fascinating animals, some of which were truly stranger than science fiction. Erectus were undoubtedly preyed on by fearsome carnivores and trampled by towering Goliaths. Regardless, their descendants would evolve into new species, including the ape voicing this video right now. Though Homo erectus would go extinct, it was really about the friends that we met along the way. Yes, I just said that. I hope you enjoyed the video. I honestly really enjoyed making this video, and I learned about a lot of animals that I hadn't even heard of. It was truly a strange world back then. I have plenty of ideas on what hominins or people to cover next in this series. I was thinking of covering Homo floresiensis next. What do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below, and like the video because no one really does that anymore. This has been your host Northo2, and I hope to see you on the next one. Adios, arrivederci.